I'm obsessed with reading challenges. I absolutely love them and they've changed my reading life. Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah and I love to talk about books. Life's a bitch and then you get divorced. I'm coming to you from a slightly flat place today. I am having a bit of a crisis at the moment because, there's no such thing as a good divorce, I guess. I'm just finding it really hard to cope with certain things that it is throwing at me, but I'm going to try and perk it up for you guys and talk about one of the things that is really helping me to get through this horrible, crappy time in my life, and that is of course books. And today I thought I would revisit something that I've touched upon quite a lot, particularly in my TBR videos, and that is about the reading challenges that I do. So reading challenges, if you've been around BookTube long enough, you will know they come in all different shapes and sizes. They can focus on things such as the amount of time you've read for, the number of books you've read, different genres, authors from different countries of origin, reading challenges where you fill prompts, reading challenges where you have a specific goal like clearing your TBR shelf. As many different reading challenges as there are readers, I suppose, and they can also span different timescales as well. So you get ones that last a day or a weekend, and to those that last a week or a month, or like the ones that I do that run for a whole year. And I love reading challenges. Why do I do them? Mainly because they're fun. I love planning for a reading challenge, picking all the books. I love making progress through them, and I love ticking off the prompts that I fill. I just think it adds a whole new dimension to my reading life. And really, I started reading challenges because I had so many unread books and I really wanted to get through them, and I was also really not happy about how many books I was reading on average. Because as you can see, this is my Goodreads account. This is a little breakdown that they do. There's loads of different stats you can get on Goodreads, and this is just the breakdown of how many books that I read over certain years. And if we look from 2010, I was averaging about, like between 20 and 30 books a year. And then we look at 2016, and I only read 3. Now these might not be completely accurate because a lot of these I read at a time where I wasn't really using Goodreads particularly. A lot of the books that I've put on Goodreads came from around that kind of end of 2016 time where I was sorting through bookcases, and I sorted all my books into different shelves where there were books that I've read or books that I hadn't, and I uploaded a lot of them into Goodreads, and if I could remember when around-ish I'd read them, I would put them in if they weren't already in Goodreads. So it's not accurate, but it's probably pretty representative of how I was reading, and 2016 was definitely a terrible year for reading for me. And it made me quite sad because reading is something that I have always loved. I always loved it ever since I could read, maybe even before. And it made me really sad that I had all these books that I had bought, obviously with the intention of reading them, and I hadn't got to. And also, it was a little bit frightening just how many I had. I think around the time where I started to really pay attention, I had about 300 unread books on my shelves, which is a lot by anyone's standards, but particularly if I was only going to be reading like 3 a year. When was I ever going to get through them? But 2017 was the year that I discovered reading challenges, and as you can see, okay, 2017 maybe not so much, but in the years since then you can see that my reading life has really bulked up, and most of that is due to reading challenges. And for me, the main focus was clearing those unread books on my shelves. I've now got that number down to about 126 books, give or take. There's ones I've bought recently that I haven't actually put on Goodreads yet, and we will just ignore the number of unread books on my Kindle. But as you can see, huge difference, and it's reading challenges that have really made that difference for me. What you can't see in that really simple graph is that also the diversity in my reading has changed. That hasn't been my main focus. It's been quite a nice side effect of the reading challenges that I do, but it is definitely something that I want to continue feeding. So how did I get into reading challenges, and what ones do I do? So in 2017, I had discovered the Goodreads reading challenge, where basically it's really simple. You just set yourself a number of books that you want to read in that year. But as part of that, I kind of found other reading challenges, and one that jumped out to me was the Popsugar reading challenge, because I was familiar with the Popsugar website because I'd used it for its free workouts for a good few years by that point. I was a bit late into the Popsugar challenge in 2017, and as you probably saw from that graph, I only read 30 books in it because I managed to throw a baby into that mix as well, and that kind of put a bit of a dent in my progress. At the time, 30 books was incredible to me, and I think probably that was where I saw the biggest shift in my mentality when it came to reading. I've mentioned before that I work in Glasgow and I have to commute into the city to get to my office, and I think before that I used that commuting time to scroll mindlessly through my phone, using social media and things, and when I picked up the Popsugar reading challenge, I used that time for my reading, and it made a huge impact. And that has always stayed with me, and now reading is one of the kind of main ways I like to use dead time, like commuting or my actual free time, rather than things that I would probably have used to spend it on, like watching Netflix or that scrolling through my phone. I barely use social media anymore because for me reading is so much more enriching, and though I do still watch Netflix, I'm not just mindlessly watching rubbish on telly from 7 o'clock at night until 10 o'clock at night. So as I mentioned, Popsugar was the first reading challenge that I took on, and as I also mentioned, I was familiar with Popsugar because I'd used their workouts before, because Popsugar is not a reading website, a bookish website. It's a lifestyle website, and part of that is this reading challenge that they put out every year. It's a challenge of 40 prompts, and they also have like another 10 bonus prompts as well, and their prompts are really varied. They cover so much, from things like genre to things like cover art, certain words in titles, things in book. Like, it's really varied. It's a really fun challenge, and obviously I didn't complete it in 2017, but I really enjoyed it, and so in 2018 I did it again, and I read all the 40 basic prompts and all the 10 advanced prompts, including throwing in another 2, because one of the prompts that comes up every year is to read a book from previous Popsugar challenges, and what I do every year is that I will read a book from each of the previous years rather than just picking one. So I read 52 books for it in 2018, and then I read 54 books for it in 2019, because I did the previous years, but there was also a prompt: read a book by an author from Asia or Africa, and I read one from Asia and one from Africa. And then in 2019 I read 54 again because I added all the extra year prompts too. Nowhere else in my life would I be classed as an overachiever, but I guess for Popsugar I am one. And so far this year I've read 49 books. 31 of them were for Popsugar reading challenge prompts, so I'm well on track to complete that this year. What I really like about it is that although it's not a Goodreads challenge, it has a Goodreads group, and this is really, for me, the home of the Popsugar challenge. There's weekly updates, and lots of threads about the different prompts and different books, and it's a really friendly community. I'm so behind at the moment in updating and getting involved in those weekly updates. I think probably because BookTube is taking up the time that I would usually have spent on that, but I definitely do want to go back in and make sure that I'm all up to date with that. But last year, obviously I did the Popsugar one again, but I wanted to add a couple more reading challenges that I've become aware of, and the first one of these was around the year. Now this is a Goodreads only reading challenge. The prompts are generated from the users of the Around the Year group on Goodreads, and then they vote on which ones to use. And the way that reading challenge is structured is that it's a book a week, so it's 52 books, but you don't necessarily need to read a book a week or read them in order. You can make it your own challenge. So last year I read all 52 books for it, but I did them in my own order and read them in my own time, whereas this year I've decided that I want to read them in order and I want to read a book a week. And so we're now in week 29 of the year, so I today just started my 29th book for the Around the Year challenge. And the third reading challenge that I do is the Reading Women Challenge, which comes from the podcast of the same name, which is hosted by Kendra Winchester and kind of a rotating group of other co-hosts. And I think I started listening to this podcast in 2017, 2018, and its premise is to, reclaim half the bookshelf. That's their slogan, and it's about making sure that books by and about women are being read and making them the focus. And so, of course, I was really excited when I found out that they also have a reading challenge. Their reading challenge is shorter than the other two, but in a way I think it's more challenging. Now, I think the majority of my reading is female authors, so I don't think it's necessarily that part of the challenge that makes it a little bit more difficult, but they do look at other aspects of diversity beyond gender, and I think that is what makes it different, at least for me, because as I said, as my focus was on clearing a bulk of the unread books on my shelves. At the time when I was buying those books, diversity wasn't really something that I considered in my reading, and so I have found that for a lot of the prompts for Reading Women, I've had to go a bit further and use library books, for instance, to fill their prompts, which is absolutely fine with me. But I do find it does add more onto the list of the books that I read, because although I will read one book, and if it fills a prompt from each of the challenges, then that's fine. But I find the Reading Women ones don't cross over so easily with the other challenges. Like the other ones, it's got a home on Goodreads as well. And again, I am really behind in updating my progress on that one. And actually, off the top of my head, I can't even tell you how far I am into the 2020 prompts. I think I'm maybe about a third through those prompts, but I am confident that I'll finish it this year. So many challenge prompts, so little time. How do I do this? So I am a bit of a planner when it comes to my reading, and actually it's something that I really love. And in terms of the reading challenge year, the end of the year is when it gets exciting for me, because kind of around November, that's when the challenge lists for the coming year are released, and that's when I get out that spreadsheet. I try and map the books that I want to read, the books that I've got on my shelves, against the different prompts, try and make connections between the different challenges as much as I can, so I don't end up reading, like if I read one book for one prompt every year, that would be something like, I don't know, like 130 books a year, and I just don't think I'll ever get to that level of reading. So I would never use one book for more than one prompt from the same challenge, but I'm quite happy to use one book for a prompt from each of the challenges if I can. And that keeps it manageable, but it also does leave a little bit of wriggle room, because particularly now that I'm on BookTube, I've got a real urge to read more new releases, and occasionally I would quite like to throw in a mood read as well. So I think planning it out at the start of the year, it might sound a bit rigid for some people, but for me it's a way of having a little bit of space, a little bit of freedom to do some other reading as well. And so reading challenges have changed my reading life. I definitely don't think that I would read as much as I do if I hadn't found those reading challenges. B, I don't think I'd be reading as diversely as I'm starting to do. And C, I don't think I would be sitting in front of this camera talking about books to you every Saturday if it weren't for the fire and the passion that these reading challenges have really sparked within me. I think the takeaway from this is that I'm obsessed with reading challenges. I absolutely love them, and they've changed my reading life. And maybe in a way to kind of explain to you guys why my reading is structured around reading challenges quite so much when I'm talking about TBRs and wrap-ups as well. But obviously I'm not the only one who is into reading challenges. I know that you probably have a reading challenge that you enjoy, or one that was the trigger for you maybe coming onto BookTube, or just really upping your reading game. So I would love it if you left a comment telling me about your reading challenge experiences. What do you think of them? Which ones would you recommend? Share the reading challenge joy. And thanks for joining me today. Sorry I started off on a bit of a downer, but look at me now. I'm smiling, I'm relaxed, because literally, books are the best medicine. So thanks for kicking it with me today. And if you're new, I put up new bookish content every Saturday morning. So please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Reading challenges, reading challenge, reading challenge, reading challenges.
Reading challenge.